Hi, buddy. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
Theme music. Hey!
Hi.
So, and Matt, are you ready to get back to a couple of episodes that are actually going to be a little more normal here?
Yes, things have been mixed up for a while because the story was running through the books out of order, or we had 2 episodes without Fantastic Four because we had done a special Fantastic Four episode. But today we are going to go ahead and record the month of September 1966, and we're going to go ahead and do all 9 books broken over the next 2 episodes because Fantastic Four is back in the lineup. So let's go ahead and jump in. Should we go ahead and do the books of September 1966?
Well, I mean, if you insist on doing the month that we all just read the books on, then, I can be persuaded.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's go ahead and jump in with Amazing Spider-Man number 40, Spidey Saves the Day. This is a huge issue entitled The End of the Green Goblin. We have Spidey standing over Green Goblin on the cover. I gotta say that it's very, very hard to write the 40th issue of a comic and make it feel like the most important issue of the comic, to make it feel like this is the culmination, and to make it feel like this is the ultimate nemesis. This is the ultimate bad guy. This is the true arch nemesis of this hero. And this book does it. This book really makes you feel like, I am terrified for my hero. He is in the biggest danger he's ever been in. This is the ultimate nemesis, and this is a hell of an issue. I love it. Okay, let's go and begin. Spidey Saves the Day, featuring The End of the Green Goblin. Stan Lee, writer. John Romita, penciler. Mickey DeMeo, inker. Sam Risen, letterer. We have Peter Parker, half dressed as Spider-Man, but with his mask off, still the prisoner of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. Also with his mask off, Peter Parker is chained to a chair with strong steel bands, while Norman Osborn is monologuing, and he is talking about all kinds of stuff. Now, of course, whenever you have a comic book, especially a Silver Age comic book, in which the hero is chained up and the villain is monologuing, it's always tempting to go like, oh, isn't this silly? Isn't this an inherently silly thing? Why don't you just kill him? Why are you going on this big speech while the hero is tied up? Well, this book, scripted by Stan Lee, at least scripted by Stan Lee, plotted, who knows, by Stan Lee or John Romita, it really does a hell of a job in the scripting to really make it feel like this guy, this clearly crazy guy, and Romita does a good job following on from Ditko with showing little beads of sweat on his forehead at all times, little crazy-ass beads of sweat to let you know that this guy is a nut job. He does a great job of really making this monologuing believable. Like, yes, this guy would be monologuing at this time. This is an entirely believable thing for him to be doing. And he then, Spider-Man, is like, well, I'm sort of slowly bursting out of these bands, and so I gotta keep him talking. So Norman Osborn very believably starts talking, and he talks about his history with Harry. Harry's mother passed away when he was just a baby. He is a successful businessman, but raising his son as a single dad and being a terrible father. Now, I'm sure he's not actually delivering all this dialogue, so either the writers are giving us more of a flashback than Norman is actually telling to Peter, or some of this dialogue Peter is imagining. I doubt that Norman is going like, and so then I said, and then he said, and then I said, and then he said.
Right. I find this interesting that when we heard Harry talking about his relationship with his dad in the previous issue, he was talking about he and his dad had always been close, and then his dad froze him out. And I find it kind of even more poignant that from this that we're seeing right here, he wasn't really there for Harry. And so if this is what Harry is looking back on as, the days when my dad and I were close, that's just so depressing.
Sad. Norman is trying. Norman buys him a bike. Norman takes him to a baseball game that looks like a Mets or a Yankees game. He's trying, but he is clearly failing. He's got to leave to go out of town when he gives him the bike. He knows he's a terrible father.
And I kind of wonder whether this is his idea of, maybe he thinks he was a worse father than he was, based on his current mental illness. That, if that's the other way of taking the difference between what we're seeing here and what we heard from Harry, is perhaps he was better at being a single father than we're seeing here, but he is clearly mentally ill, and that mental illness has caused him to be a bad father at this point, and so he may be projecting back onto this. So who knows? Where this is not a reliable narrator we're getting here, and as you said, how much of this is being is necessarily actually being communicated verbally to Peter Parker, and how much is the narrator's omniscient narrator view here.
Yeah, and so then he's remembering. He talks about when he screwed over Strom. He talks about when he became the Green Goblin because some chemicals blew up in his face, which isn't necessarily necessary. The Green Goblin has never been shown to really have super strength or any powers. He didn't really need to get any sort of chemicals blowing up. There's nothing to explain.
Does he have no super strength?
It's never been clear to me whether or not he has any super strength. He does a pretty good job fighting Spider-Man in this issue, so I guess he does. Certainly in the Sam Raimi movies, he gained super strength from his accident. It's a little unclear here, but he decides to go and become the Green Goblin. Now, the big problem with this issue, I love this issue. It's one of my favorite issues of Spider-Man, but my biggest problem with this issue is they give him a lot of time to explain how and why he became the Green Goblin. But I feel like he never really explains, to my satisfaction, why Green Goblin always wanted to take over the underworld if Norman Osborn was rich. And I feel like that's the biggest problem with this issue, is that I don't read this issue going like, oh, that's why this rich guy was trying to take over the underworld, seemingly to get money. It always seemed like Green Goblin's motivation was to take over the underworld to get rich off of it. And now that we know he's already rich, why was he doing it? We can fill in the gaps. We can read this and go like, okay, he was crazy, and he had this sort of crazed idea that I want to become king of the underworld. But they sort of are retconning it here to go like, he was always doing it to get Spider-Man. He was always doing it because of a hatred of Spider-Man. And that's not really the case in the early Ditko issues, that his primary motivation was a hatred of Spider-Man. It seemed like, no, he was unduly focused on Spider-Man. He definitely had a bizarre obsession with Spider-Man, but it seemed like Spider-Man was his secondary goal and taking over the underworld was his primary goal. And they're sort of retconning things here to make that his primary goal.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then Aunt May is very worried about where Peter is. She's talking to Anna May Watson. We then get someone we haven't seen in a while. We get Betty Brant looking prettier under Romita's pencils. She is out of town, but deciding to take a train back to town to go ahead and confront Peter and Ned. The first picture of page 9 is a very classic sort of glamour girl, looks like mid-century advertising illustration. There's a famous out-of-context painting of an old illustration where a woman is surrounded by spoons that this reminds me of, that you'll see on the internet sometimes.
It reminds me a little bit of Nick Cardy.
Yes, it does, who was a Teen Titans artist and did a lot of covers for DC. So then he is reviewing all of his previous showdowns with Spider-Man. As I said, it's sort of exaggerating the degree to which he was entirely doing these things to get Spider-Man. He then, now, another issue I have with this issue and every confrontation Spider-Man's ever had with the Green Goblin is Spider-Man just never can get the drop on him, never get ahead of him. And here we've seen Peter almost wriggling out of these things, but then the Green Goblin is like, you're never going to do that. I'm tired of waiting for you to bust out. I'm just going to go ahead and release you. Poor Peter never gets the drop on this guy. They then go ahead and fight. They fight for several pages. Romita is really excellent at this stuff. You were talking about last month on Daredevil that he really is great at fight choreography. Finally, as happens several times with Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, he suddenly has some reverse amnesia, sort of amnesia. And he then suddenly forgets Spider-Man's secret identity, forgets about his own Green Goblin's secret identity, and is acting relatively normal again. Spider-Man, totally convinced. Spider-Man, don't believe it. He always reverts back eventually, until the day you finally have to impale him to death on his own glider. But for now, Spider-Man is like, nope. I believe that he will never, says, so ends the sordid career of the Green Goblin forever. And he decides to cover for him, burn his Green Goblin costume, tell the incoming police and firefighters that, here's Norman Osborn. He's a perfectly happy, healthy gentleman. And now I am going to swing away, which he does. He goes back to Aunt May. Aunt May was worried about him, but goes ahead. And we get a really nice ending where Aunt May insists that Peter get in bed, and she is feeding him soup while he is propped up in bed against his pillows. And then we cut to Norman Osborn propped up in his own bed against his own pillows, while Harry Osborn stands over him taking care of him. And so we have both our hero and our villain now being propped up and taken care of by a family member against a huge collection of pillows for each of them. And it's really beautifully potted, whoever potted it, beautifully scripted, and beautifully illustrated issue. It feels like a massive conclusion of what we have read. Now, one thing I thought happened in this issue that doesn't is I thought Mary Jane showed up at the end and said, "Face it, Tiger, you hit the jackpot." That's a couple issues away. It's funny, I looked up when it happened, so I got conflicting reports of whether it was issue 42 and issue 46.
I thought it was the next issue. I thought it was 41. Anyway, we'll find out.
We'll find out. But so then, because that just seemed like Romita coming on the book, either as fodder or just penciler, was seemingly going like, let's go ahead and unmask everybody. And, of course, the one person that has not been unmasked, the final enemy is death. The one person who has not been unmasked is Mary Jane. And that's a face that has not been revealed yet. But that is coming up soon. Let me go ahead and check my notes to see if anything else happens. I say in my notes, this issue feels huge. Capital H, capital U, capital G, capital E. I say Lee is writing the heck out of Green Goblin's dialogue. He is scary. He is a genuinely scary person. I talk about how Betty is prettier, but she's not radically different. She still looks like Betty.
Yeah, he does a good job with that, of making her more sort of model pretty, but still obviously recognizably the same person.
Yeah. So that's it. Those were my thoughts on the issue. What do you have to say, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great issue, and this is really the new creative team making some assertive, positive decisions in terms of what to do with this book after the departure of its longtime, I think we could say at least for the last year, the primary storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just being like, I don't know, let's hedge our bets. Let's just go ahead and continue some of the stuff we've got. What are we going to do? No, it's like, okay, you know what? We got a new creative team. We are going to make some decisions about how we're doing this. And, you may like them, you may not, but here they are. And I think that very much works out to everyone's advantage. I did notice that when Parker was tied up and you were talking about the whole monologuing thing, that Peter actually thinks to himself, basically, I've got to keep him monologuing because that's the only way I'm going to get out of this. And then the Green Goblin responds with, I've told you so much. I might as well tell you the rest. After all, my secret will die with you. And yes, as you said, they're able to make his, and I don't know whether it would be fairer to call him mentally ill or brain damaged, since he did get this, essentially chemicals and concussion in the face. But, one way or the other, with his mental state the way it is, yes, it makes a little sense, but there is a little bit of the acknowledgement of, oh yeah, no, this is a dumb thing for villains to do.
Yes.
And that the heroes are aware of this and trying to encourage it more.
Yes.
So in terms of personality changes, one thing that I find is that Jameson is more about these kids these days, right? Which he really hasn't been. For all of his crankiness, for all of his crusades that he has, the kids these days haven't really been one of them. And one thing that puts me in mind of, once again, is if you accept the idea that Steve Ditko was thinking Stan Lee whenever he was writing his, the nonverbal parts of J. Jonah Jameson. Stan Lee was not somebody who would say, oh, these kids these days with their hair and their clothes. Right? And so now the moment Steve Ditko is gone, that is starting to come in here. He gets a phone call from Betty and says, no, Parker isn't here. What am I supposed to be? A lost and found department? He's probably out stealing hubcaps somewhere. Empty-headed teenagers, they're all alike. And then he calls to his current secretary to come in. I want to dictate an editorial about how the younger generation's going to the dogs. Then I'll do one about the older generation too. Might as well blast everyone. And yeah, he's still clearly recognizably J. Jonah Jameson, but these are new targets for him, as far as I can tell. I did find it odd when Betty was in Chicago and there was a radio report that Spider-Man has not been seen for a couple of days in New York City. It seems.
Does Spider-Man usually check in with the public? Is Spider-Man like, hey, just let everybody know I'm fine?
Right. Like, here's my proof of life that I offer every day.
Here's a picture of me holding today's newspaper, I promise.
But when Spider-Man decides to cover for Norman Osborn, since it seems like he's better now, not only does he cover for him, he actually tells the firemen and police, he's a hero, he helped me finish the Green Goblin. So, he's actually trying to share the glory of this moment on him. I do also notice that the fireman says to the policeman, why don't you use your gun? You can shoot him down, about Spider-Man. And the police says, on what grounds? I'm not a stormtrooper, pal. I'm like, that's nice. Also,
yeah, it seems like with J. Jonah Jameson ranting about the kids these days, and the cop going, "I'm not a stormtrooper," and the fireman assuming he might be, then more of Stanley's liberal politics leaking into the book, and more free to leak now than they were 2 issues ago.
Yes. And then finally, Aunt May, at one point when she is about to start, put him in bed and feed him some soup, she says, I do declare you have a fever. And I definitely associate I do declare with a Southern Belle accent.
Yeah, foghorn leghorn.
Gone with the Wind or something. I do declare. Wow, wait, has Aunt May this whole time, was she a Southern transplant? Did she marry Uncle Ben and move to New York City from, Charleston? Anyway, it just jumped out at me. But yeah, this is a fantastic issue.
Gone with the Wind was the most popular movie of all time, so, it could be influencing her.
Could be. All right, that's it. Yes, this is a very good issue. The new creative team is very much boldly going in their own desired direction, and it is a good direction, and it is a good creative team.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Daredevil number 20.
Yes, Daredevil number 20. The verdict is death. And one of my least favorite villains here, the Owl, who...
Yes, the Owl, who is blonde on the cover, and then white-haired on the inside, and then goes back to being brown-haired on the inside. So he has 3 hair colors here. And, yes. He is I agree, the Daredevil's lamest villain, and he is doing the lamest thing he does, which is flying, due to no help at all but his cape on the cover. If ever there was a flying villain who did not look like he should be able to fly, it is the Owl.
In his first appearance, they made some sort of lip service to, oh yeah, I'm not really flying so much. It's like I've got some limited flight capabilities, but still, it's just like, he's I don't know if I'd quite go as far as to say he's the worst, but he's not great.
Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely ridiculous that Boomerang can fly, but I'm going to give it to the Owl over Boomerang in terms of being the most ridiculous that he can fly.
Script, Smilin' Stan Lee. Penciling, parentheses, Jazzy Johnny Romita had to polish off the 25-cent Spider-Man special this month. So look who generously offered to pinch hit for old ring-a-ding this ish. Gentleman Gene Colan. Now, Gene Colan will, I think from this point, is now going to become the regular penciler on Daredevil for a number of years, and is, I think, as influential, if not more influential, than Wally Wood on the sort of future look of Daredevil, the sort of dark, noirish sort of look of his world, even though his dark noirish stories and personality don't really come about until the Roger McKenzie, Frank Miller days.
So they're saying that Johnny Urbina is off doing the 25-cent Spider-Man special. I assume they're talking about Spider-Man Annual number 3. I'm not sure when that comes out. I feel like that doesn't come out for a while, and I'm not sure Johnny Urbina actually does the art in it, if I'm remembering correctly. But, so that's strange. But this seems to be just a lie. They seem to be promising, oh, don't worry, Romita's just gone for a month, he'll be back. Well, he never comes back. And, in fact, Gene Colan, as you say, is the permanent artist as of this issue and stays on the book for years. And I feel like he is the best fit that anybody has had on this book so far. I mean, Everett, of course, did a great job on the first issue. It was Everett's character. But since Everett left, I feel like, we had Wood, who's a great artist, we had Romita, who's a great artist, but neither of them were as ideal fit for Daredevil. Neither of them I consider to be noirish artists. And Gene Colan is a noirish artist. He hasn't been doing noirish books. He's been doing Iron Man and Namor, which I feel like neither of which he's an ideal fit on. This seems to be the ideal book for Colan, and Cohen seems to be the ideal penciler for Daredevil, and I think the art in this issue is excellent, and I think Giacoya and Cohen are a fantastic pairing.
So I'm going to go grab my rubber stamp here and ka-chunk on that at co-signed. Yes, everything you just said, I will back up. So anyway, to finish the credits, yes, inking fearless Frank Giacoya, lettering adorable Artie Simek, bad guy booer, honest Irving Forbush. Daredevil is going in through his window to, is this his office or his home at this point? I can't remember. Anyway, one way or the other, there are some thugs who are hanging out waiting for him. And they're like, wait, we were waiting for Matt Murdock to ambush him. What the heck is Daredevil doing in here? Daredevil beats him up, sends him packing.
Really nice art on the top of page 2. We've got Phoenician Vines in the background as a little tribute to Ditko. And you've got the goons all mobbing at Daredevil and who is in shadow. Really nice use of blacks in that panel. Really nice panel.
Yeah, well, if you're going in and talking about some of the details on the splash page on page 1, I've got to say the thugs who are in the extreme foreground look really fantastic, and Daredevil himself is looking like Frank is trying to make him look a little bit more superhero cartoony there. But yeah, with these thugs, he's really doing a nice job with the facial expressions, with the shadows, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so this was at Matt Murdock's office. I confirmed that. And so once they run out, since he knows they were looking for Matt Murdock, he figures he should go to his home because maybe they're about to show up there. So he shows up on the window ledge doing his usual, as you said, you don't quite buy it, getting around town, by swinging around and jumping on things. So he somehow is able to reach his outside ledge right as the thugs come in his front door. With a pass key. I don't quite know how they would have gotten a pass key. But we have another one of those splash pages that's a little bit questionable as to why Gene Colan decided to make this a splash page. But,
yes.
It's well done. It's beautiful.
Kirby is an absolute master of deciding what should be a splash and what is not. Everybody else does not have Kirby's skill at it. And Colan is probably the most dubious in terms of determining what should be a splash and what should not. He likes them. He likes drawing splashes, but it's like the goons opening the door, that's a splash.
Right. And it'd be one thing if they were kicking the door in. Like, okay, I can totally get that. But no, they're literally using a key. So, anyway, Daredevil is trying to figure out how to get into his apartment to confront these guys. And he knows that he can't just come in as Daredevil because they'll be like, wait, Daredevil was at Murdock's office and at Murdock's home. Maybe there's a connection. So he's doing his best to try to slip in through the bedroom and pull his clothes and then wait till the thugs are in a different room of his apartment and then sneak in through the window and be like, oh yeah, I just came in the door a minute ago. Who are you people? Mm-hmm. On page 7, there is a panel where both Gene Colan and Frank Giacoya at one point just said, screw it. It's good enough.
Yeah.
Page 7, panel 2. If you follow any of those lines that the perspective makes on the ledge that Matt Murdock in this case is standing on, that is that building falling apart? And maybe this is supposed to get across the feeling of vertigo that he would have up there, one way or the other. If you've got the issue, take a look at it. It's just that perspective was not a high priority on that particular one.
Cohen is definitely the sketchiest artist, depending on your meaning of that word. Cohen is the artist who looks most like he has sketched the art as opposed to drafted the art, one might say. And this is a very sketched-in panel.
Yeah, I remember when I was at a comics convention, set up as an inker, and there was this guy who was trying to get into inking, and he was like showing me his samples, and somehow he had gotten a hold of a Colan page and had inked it. I'm like, dude, you are fearless. Like that is advanced right there. And whether or not you do it well, just even attempting it takes some chutzpah. So Matt Murdock is being whisked away on a private plane after these thugs get him. Then Foggy and Karen come by his apartment for some reason, which seems a little bit weird. Karen looks significantly different, I would say. Pretty, but I wouldn't necessarily recognize her as Karen Page from previous stuff. Not too bad.
And she's very fashionable. I like her fashions here.
Yes.
Cohen's work with women and with clothing is both underrated, and he does a very nice job here.
Yes. So we see that the owl is going to be the bad guy as the plane approaches this private island, because we see another copy of the owl's architectural thing that's been grafted on top of a medieval-looking castle. Yes, so the owl is gloating that he has brought Matt Murdock here, and he is going to he's putting on trial the judge who put him on trial, essentially. And so he's like, oh, but I want to make sure that this is, a full court of law, and you have your whole ability to have a defense. So we've gone and gotten the best trial lawyer in the country to come and defend you. And is this the first time we've heard people actually talking about Matt Murdock as being an especially, nationwide known lawyer?
Yes, in the last 20 issues of this book, it would frequently be the case of Matt Murdock got a client because somebody chose his name at random from the phone book, or somebody happened to walk into his office and said, I guess I'll have that guy be my lawyer. And now suddenly he's being recruited specifically because he's one of the most acclaimed lawyers in the country. So way to go, Matt. You've come a long way in 20 issues.
Whereas, I think that if I remember right, wasn't the owl one of those people who just dialed his name right out of the phone book to have him be his lawyer? That would have been a much simpler setup for this. Just okay, so the same lawyer who I had hired that didn't keep me out of jail, I'm going to have him be your lawyer so that we have, equal chance or something like that.
Yes, that would make a lot more sense.
Yes, and we do go on in the future to have him thought of as a particularly noteworthy. Noteworthy. Thank you. A particularly noteworthy lawyer. So, so this is the thing. They're going to have this kangaroo court, and Matt Murdock is realizing, I'm probably not going to be let out of here alive either, no matter what happens, so I need to figure out what I'm going to do instead. So, of course, he turns into Daredevil and comes in. They say, it's Daredevil. It isn't possible, but it's him. Think of ways in which this might be possible.
Matt Murdock leaves, they're like, well, there's nowhere on this entire island he can go, so I don't know why he's leaving. Daredevil's here. There's no way he ever could have made it out here in the middle of an island in the middle of nowhere. What possible explanation is there for Matt Murdock disappearing and Daredevil appearing, and they can't figure it out? They cannot figure it out. And I thought it was at least going to be Matt Murdock is I know someone who knows the owl who can testify. I'm going to bring in Daredevil who's going to testify. But no, Daredevil just comes in and starts beating everybody up. Daredevil's just there to beat everybody up. He's not there to testify. And it's really dumb. I very much try not to use the word dumb on this podcast. It's one of my least favorite words. And I absolutely hate it on my other podcast when James Kennedy uses the word dumb all the time to describe all kinds of things. And I'm like, that's just terrible. It's a terrible word. But yeah, this is dumb.
So another sort of wonky Gene Colan thing is on page 18. We'd already established a couple of pages earlier that there's this sort of circular table that everybody's sitting at for this thing. But on page 18, the big panel, I looked at that and I'm like, wait, what is that? And it's the round table, but it's just really, once again, not really putting that much thought into how this looks like from a particular perspective here. And once again, I just want to reiterate once more that Matt and I are both lifelong. We have been Gene Colan fans precisely as long as we have been comics fans. So whenever I talk about some of this stuff, I'm not putting the guy down, but I will call it out when there's a panel that could be better. So the owl trips Daredevil up with some billiard balls and then catches him in a cage that drops on top of him, which actually looks very familiar to the stuff that was in Lichtenbad or whatever when he was in another castle. And so then Daredevil is trapped in a cage, and Murdoch is still missing, and nobody is figuring anything out. So that is Daredevil number 20. As I said, not my favorite Owl issue. Sorry. Owl, not my favorite bad guy. And I presume that when Frank Miller took over as writer and he wanted to have Daredevil facing a kingpin of the underworld, that he was like, dude, the Owl is the one that's designated for this, but oh my God, no. So he ended up poaching the Kingpin from Spider-Man, and history was made. And I cannot say that he made a bad decision there.
And Frank Miller never touched the Owl. Frank Miller is like, I can bring my own spin. Frank Miller is like, I'll handle Stiltman. I can do Stiltman. I can't do the Owl. And throughout Frank Miller's various runs, the words the Owl are never mentioned.
And actually, one thing I noticed as well is here on the last page, page 20, when the cage is starting to fall down on him. Matt, can you describe what we're looking at when we look up at that cage on panel 3 on page 20?
Nope. In terms of the bottom of the cage, like how does that bottom of the cage work? Yeah, nope, can't do it.
Nope. Okay. Good. So it's not just me. I'm not just having a stroke or something. That's okay. Good.
You're going to be okay.
Okay.
I'll just the one last thing I had for my notes is just the last panel of page 13 when they're roughhousing, rough handling, manhandling, something like that. The judge really looks like it's by John Buscema. That just really looks like a John Buscema panel.
Yeah. Oh! It's particularly the thug with the eye patch in the background. Yes.
Well, I would say the face of the judge really looks like it's Buscema to me, but I don't think it is. I think this is just Buscema. Of course, we're about to get. He will be a huge, wonderful addition to the Marvel Universe. He will show up in the next couple of months, but I think we just have a little presentiment of it here.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
So, which one are we moving on to next? You are the one who usually knows the order better than I do.
Let's go ahead and do Thor number 132, Where Gods May Fear to Tread. So we have Coletta has become a much better inker on this book, and he has bought himself a brush. He is doing much better work. This is, I think, a very nicely inked cover. Thor is smashing up a Rigelian piece of equipment while various Rigelians are shooting guns at him. Of course, whenever I look at a Coletta cover and I find myself thinking it looks good, I always think, just as Mr. Rogers would always say, look to the helpers, I always think, look to the elbows. When Coletta seems to be doing a good job. And it's a shockingly good Coletta elbow. There's still, the elbows or underneath of the shoulder is still his weakest area here in terms of his hatching. Arms are his Achilles heel. Arms are his heel. But yes, anyway.
His Achilles arms.
His Achilles arms. So we go ahead and open the book. Rigel, Where Gods May Fear to Tread. Astonishing script, Stanley. That is true. Awesome artwork, Jack Kirby. That is also true. Artful delineation, Vince Coletta. That's kind of true. It's artful. Amazing lettering, Sam Rosen. Alien translations, Irving Forbush. So I gotta say, generally speaking, the number one way of describing space is empty. Space's number one quality is that it is empty. Well, nobody told Jack Kirby that, because we have a awesome sort of Rigelian toll booth set up to collect tolls. Sort of reminds me of Blazing Saddles with setting up the toll booth in the middle of nowhere, and yet people feel they have to stop at it. And look how crowded space is behind the Rigelian toll booth.
Yeah, that's one. So this is one place where my science minor sort of played against me somewhat when I was doing more comics inking, is that, whenever there was a place where there was space in the background, and it would usually be listed as black with, black with stars, or they would just go ahead and put in BWS, which is like, where, Barry Windsor Smith? No. I would want to either go and find a NASA picture of a star field and just go ahead and put that in the computer, or do like a random spattering of little stars, because space is empty. You aren't going to have a lot of things near you. But then I look at this stuff and I'm like, but this is this is awesome for a kid to look at. You know what I mean? And so, I would have a bit of a. Oh, and if anyone's ever interested in just how empty space is, go onto the internet and search for "If the Moon Were 1 Pixel." And there is the best demonstration I've ever seen of just how much space there is in space.
Yes. They say every planet could fit between the Earth and the Moon. So Thor shows up. He is he feels obliged to stop at the Rigelian toll booth, but just so that he can kick everybody's ass, which he quickly does. I was disappointed by page 3 in that you've got 6 panels with no backgrounds, and really felt like Kirby was shorting us on backgrounds on page 3, and Coletta obviously not jumping in to help him out.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that Colette, this may be one of those situations where Coletta just erased the backgrounds. Yeah. I mean, on panel 5 in particular, with Thor standing there waiting for Mjolnir to come back to him, he just really looks like he's floating in space there. And I'm thinking that Kirby put at least something in there to anchor him where he is. So even though we are getting better looking inks from Coletta in this issue, we are not getting some things inked at all.
Yes, you still don't trust him as far as you can throw him, is what you're trying to say. So then we cut to, on Earth, we get to one of my all-time favorite characters, Tana Nile, who is strutting around like she owns the place, and walks up to, because she thinks she is now the Empress of Earth, walks up to a policeman, tries to explain this. He's like, oh, well, let me give you a ride to go talk to the leaders of Earth if you're our new Empress. And she's like, oh, excellent. She says, take me directly to the United Nations. When I've done, I shall appoint you imperial chauffeur to the colonial empress. And then she takes some time to explain, oh, by the way, I may choose to take Earth out of its orbit and have it freeze over. And I will always love Tana Nile. Meanwhile, Thor out in space, they send a robot called an Indestructible out to face him. He is fighting with Thor. Once again, no backgrounds on page 6 and barely any backgrounds on page 7. Thor eventually figures out how to shoot the Indestructible's own laser at him, blows him up, and he is about to confront the colonizers of Rigel when suddenly the toll booth is blown up by a beam that comes to attack them from the Forbidden Galaxy. Well, we now cut to a great character who is the Grand Commissioner of Rigel, who is this old, grumpy, I want to say grumpled. That's not the word I'm looking for. He is. I'm combining grumpy with something else. I don't know what.
Neither is he gruntled.
Yes, disgruntled. Grumpy and disgruntled. Let's say that. Grand Commissioner of Rigel, and he's like, oh, I do not have time for this. And he's like, look, we've got 2 problems. We've got this guy Thor, who is determined to destroy all of Rigel until we let the Earth go and take the Earth out of our space tractor beam. And we've also got this other galaxy that is attacking us. So let's go ahead and put these 2 problems to work against each other. And he says to Thor, we'll go ahead and let the Earth go if you agree to go into the Black Galaxy and deal with it. And then Thor is like, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. And then we cut back to briefly Jane Foster, who is still desperate to get away from New York because of her Tana Nile brainwashing her, and runs into an odd-looking gentleman on a plane.
What is up with that weirdo?
I forget, does he come back next issue? Does he turn out to have some connection to the High Evolutionary, or is he just a random weirdo?
Like I said, I've never read any issues past this month. Well, any issues. I haven't read any Silver Age issues past this month for the most part, so I don't know. But I'm trying to figure out, is his head too big or is his face too small?
One of those.
All right, go on.
So then we meet a new character who will be a wonderful Marvel character through the years, the Recorder, who is a humanoid robot made by the colonizers of Rigel. And he will be a sidekick to many superheroes from this point on. He talks like a robot and says that he is just there to record things. Thor has a poorly inked underarm on page 14, so you still have Coletta's Achilles heel being his Achilles arms. And then Thor and the Recorder go into the Black Galaxy, and suddenly we get to the final page, and there is a gigantic planet with a face that says, I have been waiting for you. I am Ego. And this is a photo collage. Now, you posted what you saw. So again, we should clarify, occasionally, every once in a while, we should clarify on this podcast. I am reading scans of the original issues, which is what I prefer to read, and you are reading the versions of these Marvel comics that you and anyone else who is listening to this podcast can find on Marvel Unlimited. And one advantage, I prefer these original comics for various reasons, but one advantage you have is the photo collages, which Kirby was really not accounting for the terrible printing on these photo collages, and frequently they ended up muddy and hard to read, and they look much better in the Marvel Unlimited versions. The version you posted of this page looked much better than the muddy printing of this page in the original. It's still amazing, it's still fantastic, still worthwhile that Kirby was doing these photo collages, but they were not producing very well. So Ego, we should say, does show up in the MCU as Kurt Russell, as he was a living planet, but he was mainly interacting as a normal human being. He will occasionally do that in Marvel Comics, but for the most part, he is just a big honking human planet. He is a planet with a face, and I love him. He was in some of the earliest comics I read, a great John Byrne two-parter versus Ego the Living Planet, and I absolutely love his character. Steve, what did you think of this issue?
Well, first of all, I want to second what you said about Ego, that yes, he was the bad guy in one of the earlier comics that we read. I think probably the first 2 issues of Fantastic Four that we ever read, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be. But yeah, just a really fantastic story of Ben Grimm, trekking through, basically through his ear canal into the center of his head to try to blow him up. And just a really great Ben Grimm story. And one thing that just occurred to me as we're doing this right now, I think that on the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the later seasons, they had a character that may have been a recorder. I think maybe so. Because I was thinking at first, he's probably supposed to be one of the Watchers, but they're doing other things with that. But come to think of it, I'm like, wait, this, I think, was it. So I'll have to go back and double-check that later. But fantastic issue, as you said, Coletta doing a better-than-average job on this, with the exception of a few panels where it looks clear that he just erased some backgrounds. We get introduced, we have Tan and Isle, we have, and I just love the Regellians in general. Just something about their bureaucratic, they care more about the bureaucracy of things than about anything else, and it is just entertaining. And, introducing Ego. This is fantastic. So the only other thing I have to say is, once again, with me, being a pedantic stick in the mud when it comes to the science sometimes, one of the Regellians says, "We shall gain entrance to the invaders' ship via a bridge of ion-packed atoms." An ion is a kind of atom. So you're not going to pack atoms full of ions. Okay, I know. Once again, I get it. I know I'm being that guy. But what can I say? I am that guy. The only other thing that I've got to say is when you were like, oh, why is he bothering going to this toll booth? Remember, the ship he was on autopilot, going back to where it was supposed to go. Yes,
true. Okay, yeah, no, I love their bureaucratic ways, and I love the amount of bureaucracy that the poor Regellians have to deal with. So, yeah, and let's just say that generally speaking, the plotting has really changed in Marvel Comics. How it used to be, we sort of had these Twilight Zone-esque plots where you would have this one-issue story with a bit of an ironic twist at the end. And I sort of miss those. I sort of miss the sort of one-and-done ironic twist sort of stories we used to get. But, we've got a very different type of plotting now that is much more of a Shaggy Dog story. And, there is no point to the story. There is no satisfying wrap-up to the story. But as Shaggy Dog stories, the plotting on Thor, especially these days, is just fantastic. And the sort of, the idea of, this isn't just Thor going to this other planet and beating them up until they release the Earth, that they're like, okay, let's cut a deal. And then you've got this, the story shoots off in this other direction because he cuts a deal. There's something very sophisticated about that plotting, which I really like.
Yeah, and that's really sort of, when we talked to Douglas Wolk, he, in his book, All the Marvels, he was talking about how the Marvel Universe is a specific kind of story, that it's not something that really has a good beginning or a good end or, any of that sort of stuff, that the whole thing that makes it, to many degrees unique, at least in the days since mythology was being composed, is the fact that it's this never-ending, unfolding panoply of all of this stuff that leads into one another and recalls other things and everything. And yeah, that's kind of part of what you're talking about there. Oh, one last thing. They keep on using these mind thrusts in order to try to dominate Thor, and it keeps on not working, which just makes me think, let's try the mind thrust again. No? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
No, that's the Time Warp. Oh, there's thrust in that song somewhere, right?
It's the pelvic thrust that really drives you insane.
Yes. Yes. So I'm sorry. So yes, what I should have said is it's another mind thrust. Really drive. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. You can, yeah, you can leave that in to embarrass me if you want. That's fine.
Oh, I will. All right. Let's go ahead and we never did do Tales of Asgard in the back of the book, The Dark Horse of Death. We begin with the first page, and everything is well-linked except for Thor's forearm, which is terrible, and has as many lines in Thor's forearm as there are in the rest of the page put together. And but we've got Thor and the Warriors 3 have dealt with Hurricane, and then we got this sort of odd issue, this odd 5-page story, which is just, dealing with the aftermath of that and basically going like, we've basically killed this guy, and now we just have to spend 5 pages grappling with death. So we've got this whole issue of just like, now let's acknowledge the Asgardian reality of death. And they're like, uh-oh, this guy's going to die. Here comes the black horse of death clopping towards us. And clop, clop, clop. And its unblinking eyes glow like twin demons. And they are ready to carry Hurricane off. I would think that you could deal with this in just 5 pages, but it's going to be a 2-parter that goes into next issue. But I think this is a great little epilogue story, and I like it a lot.
The Tales of Asgard has and will continue to give them places to do different kinds of stories. And, sometimes you will have one of these ones that's just sort of, a meditation on death in the Asgardian world. And, sometimes you'll have epic quests that are going on, and they can just sort of play around with this a little bit more because they're not interacting with Marvel continuity in this case. Gives them a little bit more freedom in some ways.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go ahead and move on to Tales to Astonish, number 83.
Okay, Submariner and Incredible Hulk in the Tales to Astonish. Less than monster, more than man. And on the cover we have Hulk jumping into the sky holding both Thunderbolt Ross and Rick Jones. And you see a thoom down on the bottom where he took off. But first, we get into the Submariner story. And we still have Jack Kirby doing this. After he came in and sort of pinch hit in the previous issue, I was expecting this to get back to Gene Colan here, but I was not unpleasantly surprised to see that Jack Kirby was going to go and finish up this little bit of story here.
No, this is a very pleasant surprise. I like Colan as an artist, but I think Jack Kirby is a better fit for this book. And I don't remember what happens next, but Colan, of course, has a new full-length monthly book to do in Daredevil. And I don't think Jack Kirby stays around in this book, but I would be more than happy to keep him here. We've got, the classic Marvel team of Script, Smilin' Stanley, Pencilin' Jolly Jack Kirby, Inkin' Darlin' Dick Ayers. And I love having the old gang back together. And because, of course, these were the people who did the original books that brought the Submariner into the Silver Age. And I love having them on this book. I got to say, one question I have is, why did Dorma and Krang become white people? Because they have never actually left their ship. It's one thing if they're like, well, we're going to get jobs as secretaries and we'd better be able to infiltrate the surface world. But if you're never going to leave your ship, why become white? I do not understand.
They had some explanation of what their plan was that was going to bring them out onto the surface world. But did they never come out on land in this storyline? I guess maybe
I don't
not.
think they have.
Yeah, with all the bouncing back and forth between the different books, I guess I hadn't noticed that never actually happened. Yeah, well, whatever. So when we left Submariner, he was heading off. He was, as you said at the time, being like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I fighting Iron Man? This makes no sense. I was supposed to go and get Krang and Dorma, so I will go get Krang and Dorma. So he has caught up with them. Of course, they happen to be at the shore of New York City because that's the only place you're going to come up from the ocean. Krang has a bunch of weapons in this ship, and he's trying to choose which one he's going to use. This is on page 4. There is Sunblast, Sonic Vortex, and Power Borer. Which is kind of neat. Which one's he using here? I think he's using the Sonic Vortex.
Power Borer is something that in the movie The Rural Juror, you might have the Rural Juror's Power Borer.
Yes. What's the name of the movie? I have no idea. So, anyway, we've got really fantastic panel. Panel 1, page 5, is just a classic Kirby action battle sort of scene. Again, Kirby with the big panels trying to, I'm guessing, both get some ground behind him quickly as he's doing this and just sort of serving the big battle fight scene kind of stuff. So we see, once again, with all of these books intermingling among each other, we see the Secret Empire here, who I think was in this same book, but in the Hulk section in the past, correct? I think?
Yes. They have jumped from the back half of the book to the first half of the book.
Yes, and we see number 1, who I'm not sure if we've seen before. We've seen a lot of number 2 and number 9 and all these other folks. We may have glimpsed number 1 before. So number 1 sees Submariner in his binoculars for some reason. And he says, I have found the one man whose strength might be the equal of the green monsters himself. Thus, if I can find a way to make the Submariner serve me, my secret empire may rise again. And, I'm like, dude, you're going to get Submariner to serve you.
Yeah.
It's like, that would solve all my problems. It's like, yes, it would.
Well,
and?
He's got a plan. He's like, I'm going to make Submariner serve me by using my lobotomizer. I'm going to lobotomize him until he serves me. But then at the end, they make very clear, they're like, oh, by the way, if you hit Submariner in the head, he is especially... what's the opposite word of impervious? He is especially impervious to being, especially vulnerable to getting hit in the head and getting zonked in the head, zonked in his mind. And they're like, okay, let's keep that in mind. And then sure enough, he gets hit in the head and zonked. And the guy from the Secret Empire with the little 1 on his forehead, he thinks, I won't even need the lobotomizer. The explosion made him lose his memory. This is better than I could have planned. So it's, at least this isn't a case of like, oh, it's a good thing that I happened to come across him when he was zonked in the head. No, it's like, I had a plan. I had a lobotomizer. I just didn't need it. We're good. I'm going to go with this plan.
So anyway, and once again, I guess I was getting the Secret Empire and the Sons of the Serpent kind of mixed up in my head, because there are a number of things about the Secret Empire that seems to be reminiscent of the Ku Klux Klan and such like that, in terms of, their hoods and the Secret Empire as opposed to the, Invisible Empire is what the Klan has called themselves. And then here he says, my secret empire may yet rise again, which obviously, plays into some of that as well. But then it's the Sons of the Serpent who are being introduced at the same time, who we will see later in this month's issues, next episode, if I'm not mistaken. That is the real racist, jingoist analog to that. So I sort of feel like it would be kind of neat if they put them both together.
Yes.
Namor sees Dorma. He still thinks that Dorma just simply betrayed him rather than being blackmailed by Kang. He gets angry and, smashes something in their ship, and Namor dies below the water to refresh his strength. Krang is going to use his Fleet Destroyer weapon, and Dorma says, the Fleet Destroyer, it's your special fission bomb, able to shatter an entire undersea navy. So a fission bomb is another name for a nuclear weapon. Right?
Yes.
I mean, a nuclear weapon is a fission bomb. Many nuclear weapons then also have a fusion secondary thing that's included with it. Most do these days. But a fission bomb is basically what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So just keep that in mind. This is a nuke that he is sending towards Submariner. Submariner is not able to get out of the way, but he is able to damage it enough that it's not as big a nuclear explosion literally right in his face. So...
Hey, It gives him amnesia. It's not like he gets off totally unscathed.
Well, also, in that little pontoon that the Secret Empire's #1 is in, he is, like, looks like maybe 100 yards away from this not quite as bad nuclear explosion. Yeah, but he's fine. He's fine. It's all good. Those
fine.
robes protect him. And also, what is #1, like the guy who runs this secret organization, doing taking this little pontoon craft out into the water to, I mean, isn't this the thing that lackeys are supposed to do? Or at least have lackeys around you?
We have the Secret Empire in both halves of this book this month, and as we'll find out, the less time he spends around his supposed lackeys, the better, because they are constantly scheming. Everybody is scheming against everybody else.
Very good point. So, any other thoughts about that half before I move on to the Hulk?
No, I don't think so. Let me just look at my notes real quick. I say in my notes, fun issue, just a big Kirby battle issue, which, of course, is Kirby at his best. So we've got, essentially this is just one big fight between Namor and Krang's ship, which is just blasting the hell out of him, and he is fighting. He never even actually gets inside, but he gets to fight it quite a bit, and it is great. What a delightful surprise to have Kirby on this book. I totally forgot these issues were coming, and I'm loving it.
Okay, so in the back half of the book, we've got the Hulk. Less than monster, more than man. Betty has been captured, and so the Hulk shows up to rescue her, and she is starting to realize that maybe this is Bruce Banner, because he seems to have some real humanity to him. So that is sort of where we're going in this story. Credits first. Script, Smilin' Stan Lee. Layouts, Jolly Jack Kirby. Art, Wild Bill Everett. Lettering, Whammy Sammy Rosen. And applause, Honest Irving Forbush. I'd love it if a modern Marvel writer would start bringing back Irving Forbush as something that would be referred to.
Yes.
So the Hulk has found Betty where Boomerang has left her, and a rainstorm is starting up, and he is able to, I guess, make a cave, it looks like. Yeah, he's like hand digging a cave to shelter them from the rain. This is where she's starting to realize, oh, hey, there seems to be a good person somewhere buried deep inside there. We see Boomerang about to get a rare second chance from the Secret Empire. And one thing I find is kind of nice that, as much as the portrayal of Boomerang is just lame, on page 3, panel 4, we see a close-up of Boomerang's shoulder, and we see where a lot of his little red washers have already been plucked off and used. So,
yeah.
Bill Everett is keeping that little bit of continuity there, that he hasn't been able to replenish his red washers yet.
Yeah, it's about time. I think you need to refill your washers there, buddy.
Indeed. So Boomerang is going to go and try to fulfill the thing of getting the missile or weapon or whatever it is that he was hired to get in the first place. Figures out that since General Thunderbolt Ross is heading out with most of the army to go rescue his daughter, that is going to leave the weapon relatively vulnerable for him to now be able to get. We do see specifically that Thunderbolt Ross is a 3-star general, we see on page 4. So the Hulk is able to start a fire for Betty just by smashing 2 rocks together over a pile of sticks, and then they automatically burst into flame.
They've made it very clear over the years that the Hulk is an Eagle Scout, so that does make sense.
Yes. We're then going to, as you said, see the Secret Empire for a moment here. And it's yet another one of these little council chambers where they're all talking. Now, I noticed that in the first half of the book, #1 actually had a #1 on his forehead. Here, none of them have their numbers on them. So how they're telling each other apart, I do not know. One of them tries to kill the highest ranking one in the room with what looks like a potato masher grenade. Presumably, it's also going to kill some other people, but then it turns out he's got full iron, body armor that even covers his head underneath his robes. So it may take out some of the other ones along the way, but the one who was actually being targeted, he's like, no, I'm like Dr. Doom. I'm just covered in this stuff all the time. I just have robes on top of my armor because, somehow that seems more intimidating than riveted iron armor all over my entire body.
Yes.
All right, so we've got some Hulk versus the Army, which is always fun. Rick, who, of course, just can hitch along a ride with army jeeps because he's not in the army, so that's how things work. The Hulk then takes Thunderbolt Ross and Rick Jones with him to go see Betty Ross because there's somewhere in his mind that he knows that these people will be able to help each other and that he likes Betty. And so then he leaves Ross and Rick Jones there and jumps off into the sky, into the darkness. And then we see him just brooding on a hilltop. Next ish, the Hulk runs amok in the city. What are your thoughts on this issue?
I say in my summary, okay, Art, okay, issue. I thought we were done with Boomerang! Exclamation point. I really thought last issue would hopefully be the last we saw of Boomerang for several years. Instead, he's right back at it. He didn't even take time to restock up his red washers, and he's like, nope, I'm going to go back out and try to steal a missile now, so we're not done with Boomerang, which is a bummer because he is lame. You know, the Hulk fighting missiles, Hulk fighting Glenn Talbot, Betty and Rick Jones trying to win him over, all good. That's all classic Hulk stuff. That's fine. The infighting, boy oh boy, the Secret Empire is the most conflict-riddled organization we have ever had in the Marvel Universe, and they're still at it. So he says, now only number one stands between me and my goal. And of course, we've just seen that number one now has Namor working for him, which seems to be setting up a crossover between the books. I don't remember if one is coming up, but we will see. But yeah. I say I don't like the Kirby Everett art as much as I like Kirby solo or Everett solo. But I don't feel like their styles complement each other very well. But the art is still okay.
Yeah. And one thing that just occurred to me with you talking about them being the most conflict-ridden organization ever, it kind of reminds me of the Star Trek Mirror universe, where you just wonder how do they have enough people left in the ship? If the way you get a promotion is by killing the person in charge of you. It seems like a really quick way to have some serious problems. I do like the character development we're getting, particularly with Betty, but then also to some extent with the Hulk. And the Hulk really he has reached the personality that will sort of be his standard personality, that he will always sort of the mean that he will always revert back to for the next decades at this point. Referring to himself in the third person, sort of leaving out some minor words and sentences, just wanting to be left alone, having some sympathy for Betty Ross, all this stuff. We've kind of finally reached the Hulk as you and I knew him when we were kids.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, and I like it. I think this is, there's a lot of just bread and butter of Hulk stories here, and it's no surprise they've gotten so many years of stories out of it.
All right.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the X-Men number 24. I know you have to go in about 15 minutes, so I think we can deal with this issue in 15 minutes, because it is bad, and I think we should not linger on it. This is Roy Thomas. I felt like got off to a good start in this book. And then Werner Roth doing him no favors. Editing by Stan Busy Beagley. Script by Roy Bookworm Thomas. Art by Werner Werker and Roth. Or should I say Werner Werker and Roth. Inks by Dick Doodlebug Ayers. Lettering by Sam Pussycat Rosen.
As I said earlier, I declared this the year of Soupy Sales. I could very easily have alternately declared this the year of the Pussycat in the Marvel Universe here. And I do not know whether Mr. Roth pronounced his first name Werner or Werner or Werner, but I just wanted to go ahead and acknowledge that we have no idea. Just like one of the things I've often wondered is with Jack Kirby's given name, was the name Jacob pronounced Jacob or Jakob? I've always wondered that, but have never been able to find anyone who could fill me in. But anyway,
I don't know.
So let's go on.
Okay, so this is the Plague of the Locusts. So, again, we already discussed in the Daredevil issue that I don't like the word dumb. I don't like it when people describe things as dumb. Now, one of the problems you have with Silver Age is sometimes you ask people, like, you tell people, hey, these old Stan and Jack and Stan and Steve issues were great. You should read them. And they're like, oh, aren't those issues filled with dumb Silver Age stuff? Don't they have dumb Silver Age villains? Well, I feel like this issue is one of the few Marvel issues we've read that really, I feel like, exemplifies the concept of dumb Silver Age. Exemplifies this concept of really lame, I prefer the word lame, really lame Silver Age villains. This is very much a done-in-one story, where the one continuing element we have is that Jean has been told by her parents, like, you're like 19 now. Shouldn't you be in college? Didn't you graduate from Xavier's a long time ago? And so she is mentally levitating books off the shelf for her to take with her. She is being sent off to college. Scott is, of course, all torn up about this. Jean is pretty torn up about it, too. She thinks, I won't cry in front of them. I won't. But all my life, I'll remember the day and be glad that I was privileged for a time at least to be one of them. Scott and Warren still fighting over her, take her to school, only to have her be met by a handsome boy who offers to take her from them in more ways than one and take her to her dorm.
With a 17-year-old daughter who is graduating from high school right now and going into college, I can say that, yes, if you had your daughter in this private high school and she graduated and then she hasn't come home in a year, I would have some questions.
Yes, and presumably always covered in bruises from being mercilessly beaten by supervillains. There's reasons to be suspicious.
And the danger room.
Yes, and the danger room alone. My God, she's always limping. So then we cut to one of the lamest villains in Marvel history. I would say the Locust. He is dressed up as a giant locust. He controls an army of giant locusts, and he has locust powers. He is tremendously lame.
In terms of the dumb Silver Age stuff that you were talking about, this, I mean, we have had ones this bad. I mean, think of the Giant Man story with the scientist who was studying the bees in the test tubes, and there was the green ray that was going around and, coming out of the Ghostbusters mobile. We've had stuff like this, but yeah, I felt like we had left it behind, and now it's back.
You had me on think of the Giant Man story. Yes, think of every Giant Man story, all of which had lame villains. But yes, this is a villain worthy of those lame Giant Man stories, where the Locust and his army of giant locusts are eating all the grain on various farms. I was thinking of one of my favorite lines from Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they had an episode with giant locusts attacking cities. And they had the special announcement system on the streets going, everyone get off the streets, everybody get inside. And then they added, nobody dressed like wheat.
Right. Yeah.
So then the X-Men are like, well, this guy could be a mutant, so this makes it our job. So let's go ahead and try to stop the Locust. And they fight the army of giant locusts. They also have to deal with the government who is spraying chemicals. Then it turns out, sheer coincidence, that Jean in her new college has met the Locust. She has met the professor who is secretly the Locust and doesn't like him at all. And then she eventually decides to go ahead and take a break from college immediately. I don't know how her college feels about this. And comes back to talk to the X-Men. The X-Men quickly realize that she's like, a boy who I met told me that Dr. Hopper holds some rather far-fetched theories about insect mutation. He believes ionic bombardment could one day increase their size and lead to the destruction of mankind. They go ahead and put two and two together. This leads them to go out and confront the Locust one more time. I will go ahead and just zip through this. Suddenly, Professor Xavier can walk again. He is wearing a disguise. He is walking with his new transistorized bracers that he's used before. They eventually convince, generally speaking, you want superheroes to be able to arrest villains, and it's always sort of a problem when they can't, because here they just have to convince the Locust of the error of his ways, dump his gear into the river, which I guess is not necessarily the best for the environment. Presumably this is, the Hudson River, which was a disaster at this point in history anyway. So they're like, what's one more pollutant in the Hudson River?
Yeah, well, don't worry. All the insects that might be affected this are long since dead in that river.
Exactly.
Although I guess that was really further down towards New York City. I don't know if it was here, but yes, definitely.
So then they send him away, and the bee says, what of Dr. Hopper, Professor? Do you think we'll see more of the Locust? And as Professor S takes off his phony mustache and beard, he says, it's impossible to say, Hank. We can only hope that he has learned his lesson permanently. So they're not even like, not even like Spider-Man and Green Goblin. It's not even like, now we know for certain that we shall never see the Locust again. They're like, this is Professor X being very honest here. He's like, I have absolutely no reason to think he's going to turn to the good, but we're just hoping he is because we have no ability to arrest people. So let's hope we've heard the last of the Locust. And indeed, the Locust will eventually show up later in Marvel history, although he should not because he is tremendously lame. This is a lame issue. The art is weak. The writing is weak. This book is weak. It's sort of interesting to have Jean leave and come back a little bit, maybe. But generally speaking, just pretty lame.
Yeah, it just seems like, why have her leave for college this issue and then have her come back in the weekend the same issue, right? I mean,
yes.
At least have that be an issue separated from each other, right? Preferably two, but nope, just saying, oh no, she's going off to college forever. Oh, look, she's back.
Yes.
So, let's see, a few different things here. Yeah, so Jean is going to Metro College, which we have determined is the college where Johnny Storm and Wyatt Wingfoot are going. As a matter of fact, we see on one of the panels, presumably Wyatt Wingfoot and Johnny in the background at a college mixer that they've got here. Because we have the big, tall guy with black hair towering over the younger, handsome guy with blonde hair. But Stan has to say, note, no, this isn't Johnny Storm and Wyatt Wingfoot. They're in the Himalayas. We just wanted to see if you were paying attention, Werner. Or Roy. Right, it'd probably be Roy that he would be getting, whose case he would be getting on there. Yeah, it's just, I really wish that they would. Yeah, you're right. This team seemed to have some promise to it when Roy Thomas first came on, and it is not living up to that.
Yeah, I'd say air my nuts that if you had told me, guess what, Roy Thomas has taken over X-Men and now he's about to take over Avengers 2, I would have said, oh no. But Roy Thomas is in fact going to do a much better job on the Avengers than he does on the X-Men.
Do they ever even give a fig leaf of a reason why the Locust is able to have these superpowers? I mean, I guess his wings were mechanical, but he's a chemist and he has like superpowers like the peripheral vision of a locust and, various other things that it's like, oh, did you not remember that a locust can do this? Therefore, so can I. And do we get even a fig leaf of explanation as to how any of this happened?
He's bit by a radioactive locust. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on.
And then why does Professor X dress up as a hermit? They specifically say a hermit. He's coming up with a beard and mustache and a cape and a walking stick on the Ohio River somewhere, right? They specify it somewhere along the Ohio River. And it's like, oh, yes, that would make sense. A hermit living off in a little hovel somewhere along the Ohio River. And why are they making him walk? It's just, I'm getting angrier the longer I talk about this. So let's stop.
Also, in my notes, I say that talk about the terrible cliche dialogue. They must mock me as well. Call me crackpot and mad scientist. I, mad? That is the supreme irony. I'm like going, oh, this is terrible cliche dialogue. It reminds me of one of my favorite pieces of dialogue ever was from a movie I never saw. They had this dialogue in the trailer, and I loved the dialogue in the trailer. I don't remember the name of the movie, but the dialogue in the trailer, it had, two people. It was a parody of old science fiction movies, and it had, it was in black and white. It had this couple sitting at a dinner party. Then there was something off about the couple, and the man was saying, us? Aliens? Is that one of your Earth jokes?
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Although that would be the perfect response. If somebody, was saying, are you an alien? To just come back with, is that one of your Earth jokes? Oop, I mean, never mind. I have to be over there now.
Yes. I could not tell you what this movie was, but that joke from the trailer has always stuck with me.
All right. So, yes, we have just about reached the time that I said that I needed to quit in order to get ready for the other things I need to do this afternoon. So I say we go ahead and wrap this up here, and we will continue with the second half of this month soon.
Yes, an amazing issue of Spider-Man, an amazing issue of Thor, and everything else was adequate.
Adequate, give or take.
Yes.
More or less, depending on what you're talking about. I love Gene Colan's art on Daredevil, even though it had the owl and had some pretty dumb stuff. I like Kirby's art on Submariner and, a number of other things. But yeah, there was some stuff that was just, you say you hate to use the word dumb. I hate to use the word trash. But some of it was trash.
Yes. Okay, well, Steve, thanks for recording this with me. We are going to go ahead and break up our recording sessions as you would break up listening to them, and we will record more soon. Good luck with your daughter making her college decisions, and I will go ahead and say goodbye to everyone. Goodbye.
Yes, we got bye, and take care, stay safe out there. Thanks for listening to Marvel Reread Club. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews and ratings are a great help and always appreciated. We love hearing from you. Go to marvelrereadclub.com to find notes and join the discussion about this episode. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.